What is up, Scream Team? Zach Cherry here, and in this video, I'm going to tell you which horror franchise you are most likely to survive based on your zodiac sign. Other than being obsessed with horror movies, I am a huge astrology nerd, and nothing annoys me more than when I see comprised lists ranking the zodiac signs based on which ones are most to least likely to survive a horror movie. Each sign possesses its own unique traits, skill sets, and worldviews that it's kind of unfair to make a generalized assessment on everyone's survival rate, seeing as how not every horror movie scenario is exactly alike. In truth, there are many factors to take into consideration, and that actually means that not every zodiac sign is going to perform consistently from one franchise to the next. For example, just because you went toe-to-toe with Michael Myers and survived doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to make it out of a jigsaw trap. Anyway, if you like this kind of content, make sure to subscribe to my channel and let me know in the comments down below which horror franchise you survived based on your zodiac sign. Let's get into it. If you're an Aries, you are most likely to survive the Evil Dead franchise. In most horror movies, an Aries might be the first one to die, simply for their impulsive decision making or from their insatiable need to be seen as the hero in the eyes of the other zodiac signs, as that usually gives them an unrealistic sense of confidence in their own abilities. However, when it comes to fighting against possession and the Deadite army, Aries actually have a bit of a leg up, because these are very resilient people who have a warrior spirit. Now, the franchise's canon in regards to possession has always been a bit inconsistent, but it's been highly implied that the accessibility that the demons have to our souls is measured by the host's fearlessness and strength of character. Most of the people who succumb to possession are shown to be weak-willed, while the characters who do survive are able to fight the demon internally and push them out with the sheer force of their will. Because Aries are so confident, courageous, and determined, their personality traits actually behoove them in an Evil Dead universe, because they're the ones who are going to gallantly challenge their oppressors and take the risks necessary to survive, which in any other franchise would usually be the thing that gets them killed. Aries are also fiercely independent, which kind of imbues them with a strong sense of leadership that just naturally influences others. And as we've seen with the Evil Dead franchise, there's definitely value that comes from being the trailblazer, whether it's just leading a small group of people in a cabin, apartment complex, or an entire army of medieval soldiers. If you're a Taurus, you're most likely to survive the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. Tauruses are known to crave stability in their lives and often surround themselves with their creature comforts, whether that's luxurious material goods or the finer tastes of gourmet foods and drink. Basically, they just like to create a very cozy sanctuary for themselves, and that could not be further removed from what one might find if they wander into the Sawyer family farmhouse. Now, one could argue that a Taurus would survive this franchise simply for the fact that they would never even step foot in an environment like that, but in the case of these movies, if they did happen to venture along on a road trip with their friends, they would absolutely be the final person of the group to walk up to that front porch. This might even be due to them being too lazy to go anywhere at first, thereby increasing their chances of survival by default, as everyone else would already be dead by that point for having taken more initiative from the onset. Even so, the only reason they might find themselves in peril is just because of their extreme loyalty to their friends and family, not wanting to leave anyone behind. But once they're inside the farmhouse and surrounded by a mess of garbage, human remains, and bloodthirsty cannibals, every ounce of energy in their body is going to fight to get the hell out of there, because it's just going to be way too gross and unpleasant for them otherwise. And Taurus, being the most stubborn sign of the zodiac, will relentlessly try to escape the situation until they're finally clear of it. If you're a Gemini, you are most likely to survive the Hellraiser franchise. The Hellraiser movies are very complicated when it comes to their own rules, especially in regards to the lament configuration, as the outcome does often feel very arbitrary for whoever opens the box. Sometimes they're able to transform the puzzle into an elaborate lozenge shape that opens demonic portals, but usually the thing just shoots out hooks that latch onto your skin and you're immediately sucked into an eternity of torment. Either way, it takes a very creative and inquisitive person to even attempt to solve such an intricate puzzle, and Geminis possess the intellectual curiosity and quick learning capabilities that would allow them to master master this. Because of that, they would easily figure out how to use the lament configuration to their advantage just by the way we see it can banish the demons almost as easily as it conjures them. However, Gemini's greatest tool to survival here might actually be their natural charisma and communication skills, as once the Cenobites have been summoned, it is possible to bargain your way out of eternal damnation by offering them something in exchange for your flesh and soul. Geminis are not only smooth talkers who can effortlessly form social bonds, but they're very manipulative and influential, and with their ability to think fast on their feet, they would be the Zodiac Sign most likely to formulate a plan to buy themselves extra time. And with their talent for being deceptive and two-faced, they would know the right things to say to their adversaries to be able to safely turn the tables on them. If you're a Cancer, you are most likely to survive the Alien franchise. Perhaps the greatest downfall for anyone who finds themselves battling one or more xenomorphs comes down to their own ego, as the various space crew and marines who are employed by the Weyland-Yutani Corporation are shown to be more so preoccupied with their own self-importance. As it turns out, however, it takes a great deal of compassion and humanity to look beyond the ego in order to have an understanding of what needs to be done for the greater good of your team's safety. Cancers, being one of, if not the most intuitive of all the zodiac signs, allows them to accurately read and assess a situation very viscerally, as they're highly attuned to those around them and possess the patience needed to carefully weigh through all of their options. Because of this, they can trust their instincts to know who the best people are to align with for the purpose of their own prolonged survival, and if they potentially aren't getting a good read on someone, it's probably because that person is secretly an android whose artificial intelligence has been programmed to compromise the mission for ulterior motives. With that understanding, it's not difficult to see that a Cancer would foster their instinct and intuition in others by building a family unit, as their nurturing disposition will naturally lead them to protect the people closest to them, which in turn will strengthen their resolve and increase their rate of survival. If you're a Leo, you are most likely to survive the Friday the 13th franchise. As we've seen through many of the Friday the 13th films, whether the primary antagonist is Jason Voorhees, his mother, or copycat paramedic Roy Burns, there's a very specific strategy that the killer will use, where they target their victims by picking them off one by one, which is easily achieved as most of the characters eventually separate from the main group. Because of this, surviving Friday the 13th essentially becomes a popularity contest, as it's more often than not that the final person is the one with the most friends or connections to the other characters. As Leos themselves are known to be natural-born leaders who radiate joy, confidence, and theatricality, their innate ability to be the center of attention will inadvertently endow them with a protective shield, simply for the fact that more people will gravitate around them than anyone else. As the more introverted, preoccupied, and alternative characters start to disperse, where they are then quietly taken out by the killer, it's going to be the Leos who will make it much further into the night, ultimately becoming the last one standing, almost purely by virtue of being the most difficult person to get to. Now, that's not to say that they're just survivors by default, because they definitely do have to work for it, since by the time they realize that they're all that's left, they're going to be able to recognize their own strength and authority, and bravely set a target on their oppressor to which they will tenaciously stick to until they eventually regain control of the situation. If you're a Virgo, you are most likely to survive the Halloween franchise. Perhaps more than any other horror IP, Halloween is the template when it comes to setting the rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie. For instance, no sex, drugs, or alcohol, as Michael Myers seems to first target the teens who are shown to be playing fast and loose. Of course, the characterization of the shape has been a bit inconsistent over the decades, but for most of the franchise's survivors, they typically possess the common quality of being rigid perfectionists who are highly critical of themselves and the world around them. As Virgos are the ultimate sticklers when it comes to following protocol and adhering to the rules, it gives them a huge advantage over the rest of their friends, as their overly serious work ethic and commitment to organization will find them being much more observant and detail-oriented, just through their intense desire to always be doing better. Because of that, they will have a much easier time identifying the things that seem strange or out of place, such as the creepy man in a mask who seems to be lurking behind bushes at every corner. And while everyone else is underthinking the situation, believing Virgo to be obsessing over things that aren't important, it will ultimately be the Virgos who come out on top, proving to be dependable individuals who possess the focus, innovation, and creative problem-solving capabilities in order to carve out the best path for survival, which they've been thinking about since the first moment they sensed any danger. If you're a Libra, you are most likely to survive the Hannibal franchise. Whether Hannibal Lecter is living in high society while secretly serving his victims for dinner, encased in a psychiatric facility where he's enlisted to help the FBI catch active serial killers, or living life on the lam as an escaped convict who's desperately trying to evade detection, his motive for murder is always the same. He detests rude people. This is where it pays off to be born under the sign of the scales, as Libras have a natural tendency to be polite, diplomatic, and are drawn towards creative and expressive pursuits that showcase their intelligence, sophistication, and fine tastes in culture. Based on these traits, it's likely that the deranged cannibal would take a shining to you, purely out of respect for your like-mindedness. Therefore, he would be more prone to spare your life and instead target individuals who he finds to be unrefined, lacking in basic manners, or possibly just don't meet up to his exorbitantly high social standards. However, Hannibal's greatest weakness is his ego, and Libras, more than any other sign, are able to turn on their charm and appeal to the Mad Doctor's highly constructed opinion of himself. Whether this is achieved by showering him with compliments or making him feel important, he will likely be disarmed by Libra's congenial and effortless disposition and view them with great reverence and admiration. Hannibal is one of the most intelligent serial killers to exist in film and literary fiction, so it's not exactly easy to manipulate him, as he has a very intimate understanding of human psychology. But since Libra's manipulative tendencies are so intrinsically linked to their need to be well liked by others, not even they can detect when they're being disingenuous, as they believe it's an act of nobility to tell people exactly what they want to hear. While in most cases these lies would be seen as deceptive behavior, for this particular franchise it might actually save your life. If you're a Scorpio, you are most likely to survive the Scream franchise. Where the Halloween movies were built on a foundation of playing by the rules, Scream would be the franchise in which you succeed by bending them, as it takes a very willful individual who isn't afraid to challenge the status quo and become a master of their own fate in order to survive. For Scorpios who absolutely detest being told what to do and which rules they need to follow, they would be the most likely to beat a Ghostface killer at their own game, simply for the fact that they are tenacious control freaks who need to have the last word in almost any situation. As we've also seen through many of the Scream movies, the protagonist usually gains the upper hand after they decide to give the killer a taste of their own medicine, whether that means becoming Ghostface themselves or tapping into an intense primal instinct. A Scorpio will have the emotional wherewithal to do so, as these are dark-minded individuals whose rationalization for survival could easily fall into a moral gray area. In other words, when their enemies go low, they go lower, as they become extremely vindictive when pushed hard enough, and will exact their vengeance on the killer with an all-or-nothing attitude. In addition to that, Scorpios are seekers of the truth, and their obsessive tendencies will find them needing to get to the bottom of the mystery without ever giving up. And while there are plenty of characters who have tried to figure out the killer's identity and died in the process, this particular sign will usually fare much better, as they would never make the cardinal mistake of letting on what they know to the wrong people. This is because Scorpios have a very difficult time trusting as it is, meaning that they're more likely to survive just by virtue of them putting up walls between themselves and a myriad of potential suspects. If you're a Sagittarius, you are most likely to survive the Jaws franchise. Now, to be fair, any zodiac sign can survive Jaws simply by not going in the water, so this is more so reserved for the people who are reckless enough to sail out to sea and put themselves in direct conflict with the great white shark, which for Sagittarius is kind of par for the course, as they are known for being extremely reckless people who eagerly volunteer for risky and thrill-seeking adventures. Of course, that almost guarantees them a death sentence in every other franchise, but for Jaws, they actually stand a better chance than most. This is because it does not matter how much skill, knowledge, or experience you have, the sharks depicted in the Jaws movies are super intelligent and will be able to figure out what the humans are up to and outsmart them at their own game. Therefore, it's usually the obsessive or overly analytical people who falter first, as they're so used to doing things in a prescribed method or by sticking to a very stringent set of textbook rules. Sagittarius, however, does not like to be tied down to any rules, and their their sense of freedom and independence will find them revolting against those in seats of control. This does kind of make them very irresponsible in that regard, since their natural drive towards action has them never thinking about the possible consequences that may result. However, since that also makes them very spontaneous and flexible, they're actually able to thrive on change and adapt really well to unpredictable scenarios. So while the best laid plans eventually go awry due to the sharks being several steps ahead, it's going to be Sagittarius's go with the flow attitude that will find them coming up with a highly ambitious and creative plan on the fly that will be so fantastical and ridiculous that any shark, no matter how highly evolved they are, will never be able to predict where they're coming from. If you're a Capricorn, you are most likely to survive the Child's Play franchise. The common theme among all of the survivors of this franchise is that they are either kids who have been forced to grow up extremely fast, or adults with a world-weary view who never have time to enjoy the fun things in life. This is very much in line with a Capricorn's personality, as these are overly serious people who look at life realistically and practically, and have a very shrewd understanding of how the world works around them. Because of this, they develop a very pessimistic attitude at a young age, and therefore it becomes a lot more common for them to put their toys away early on and overlook their own emotional needs in favor of being more grounded and hardworking. Now, if for whatever reason they do somehow happen to find themselves in a situation where Chucky has invaded their lives, it's going to be much easier for a Capricorn to see through the doll's BS, as they are overly cynical people who are just naturally suspicious of everyone and everything, especially an object that represents childhood wholesomeness, regardless of whether or not it's a vessel for the soul of a serial killer. This doesn't necessarily mean that Capricorn is impervious to the threat that Chucky imposes, but the voodoo-inclined good guy doll is always operating at his best when he's killing victims who are either quick and easy to take down or just never see it coming, and those are usually people who are highly idealistic or just easily beguiled by toyetic wonderment. As Capricorns are known to be cold and distant and have no time for things they consider to be unserious, it automatically becomes much harder for Chucky to kill them, as he knows he can't appeal to them on an abstract level, and with their ability to remain calm and level-headed against Chucky's more explosive outbursts, they'll be much more capable of taking him down than any of the other more emotional and trusting signs of the zodiac. If you're an Aquarius, you are most likely to survive the Saw franchise. Although Jigsaw's ideologies will vary depending on whether the game has been designed by John Kramer or one of his many disciples, the original objective was pretty straightforward. Not only did he want you to survive the trap, but more importantly, to do so only after learning a valuable life lesson. And even though this is an extremely radical way to get a point across, for an Aquarius, it would be viewed as a challenge that they would wholeheartedly embrace. That's because they are humanitarians at their core, and even if they don't agree with Jigsaw's punishment, they would certainly be interested in understanding his argument through a world lens, as they're a logical sign that always needs to prove themselves intellectually. Aquarius individuals also deeply value their freedom, and even though these saw traps physically lock their participants in shackles, the games are more about the underlying mental or emotional prisons that we've created for ourselves. Most of Jigsaw's victims are unable to make that distinction, however, and usually succumb to their fate by repeating the same mistakes over. But since Aquarius is a sign known for thinking outside of the box, they're more capable of looking at the bigger picture and using unorthodox methods to solve their problems, even if that means trading one of their appendages in order to survive. In some cases, certain traps also require you to play the game with other participants, which can often lead to disastrous results, as your fate is impinged on the decisions made by the other players. However, not only will Aquarius excel in these situations based on their analytical problem-solving skills, but they also have a good understanding of human behavior and the way society works, so they'll be able to empathetically maneuver around others while still detaching themselves emotionally in order to make difficult choices. If you're a Pisces, you are most likely to survive the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. With Freddy Krueger's power existing entirely in the dream realm, he's kind of limited with the amount of damage he's able to distribute to his hapless victims. However, everybody's gotta sleep eventually, and once you've drifted off into a deep slumber, there's really not a lot you can do to protect yourself or even be aware of the fact that you're dreaming. That is, unless you're a Pisces, as this sign has home court advantage when it comes to dealing with flights of fancy. In their everyday lives, Pisces have a natural tendency to disassociate and escape reality, where they're already accustomed to inventing overly idealistic scenarios in their minds. Because of this, they are highly attuned to their own psychic abilities and are able to filter the energy and information that comes to them. This acts as a strong offense against Freddy, as they'll be able to imbue themselves with mystical strengths and skills and harness that power in a way that could ultimately defeat him. As Pisces also tend to not see the world for what it is and instead act as though they're already living in the world they want, this will give Freddy a tougher time altering the reality around them, as their dreamy and detached nature will give them just as much, if not more, control over their surroundings. All in all, Pisces are kind of magical, witchy people, so their sense of spirituality and intuition will be their greatest strength. And as long as they don't allow Freddy to prey upon their fears and insecurities, they will triumph over the dream demon with their unmatched ability to imagine and create. I want to thank my Patreon supporters, Ann J, David Butt, Evie's Moving Castle, and Ryan Reagan. If you enjoyed this horror astrology content, you can find out which Ghostface killer you are based on your zodiac sign right over here, or check out some of my other content over in this playlist. Until next time, I've been Zach Cherry, and I'll be right back.